The bitter battle for power in South Africa. The ruling ANC chooses a new leader who will probably be the next president. But can this successor to Jacob Zuma make a difference? And does the ANC still appeal to the aspirations of South Africans? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm Laura Kyle. Welcome to the programme. The Watershed meeting to elect a new leader for South Africa's ruling party, the African National Congress, faced legal challenges as it kicked off. Some delegates were barred by court orders from attending the ANC leadership contest. The African National Congress is deeply divided over who should take over from Jacob Zuma. N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma is the South African president's preferred candidate. The other main contender is Cyril Ramaphosa. Supporters say his business background makes him the best option to turn around South Africa's flagging economy. We'll get to our guests in just a moment, but first, Tanya Page has more from Johannesburg.
The African National Congress elective conference is underway and it's going to be unfolding here over the next 5 days. But most of the discussion and debate will be happening behind closed doors in those buildings there just in the distance behind the fence. We can see some of the delegates. There are about 5,000 or so who have come here from branches of the ANC all over the country. They won't just be voting for the top job of president, but deputy, and in fact all the top 100 key positions. But of course, it's the presidency that is the most contested, the most important to the future of the ANC. And there are really two main contenders. The first being N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma. She is a very experienced politician. She was a member of Parliament and a minister under successive governments of the ANC. She's a former chairperson of the African Union, very experienced. She's had a bit of a catchphrase in the campaign, that of radical economic transformations. She's seen as being very pro-poor and accused of being populist by some. Her main rival is the current Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, another ANC stalwart. Neither of these individuals is a new name, a new face. They have a long history in South African politics and in the liberation struggle and the struggle for freedom. Cyril Ramaphosa was a trade unionist. He helped formulate this country's constitution, a very popular man seen as being pro-business. He has a business background and a bit of a darling of the markets. He's got more defined economic policies perhaps because of that. Dla-mini Zuma is the favoured candidate of President Zuma. In fact, they used to be married, they have children together. She is believed to be the one most likely to protect him from any legal action. There are hundreds of corruption charges hanging over him that could resurface, whereas his deputy, Cyril Ramaphosa, potentially the next president of the ANC, is less likely to protect the outgoing Zuma from those charges.
Well, let's take a closer look at the African National Congress and why this vote is such a big deal. Formed in 1912, the party's governed for 23 years since the apartheid. Jacob Zuma has dominated the political landscape since he became leader 10 years ago. But with Zuma tainted by corruption scandals, the ANC suffered its worst losses ever in government last year, polling 54% of the vote in local elections. Whomever wins the party vote in Johannesburg will either lead the ANC to its first national electoral defeat or become the next president. Well, let's get the thoughts now of our guests. And joining us from Johannesburg, Bongani Mbendwane, National Security Advisor to the South African Minister of Police. Via Skype from Cape Town is Lawson Naidoo, Executive Secretary of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. And from just outside Johannesburg, also via Skype, is Trevor Ngwane, a social activist and researcher for the Centre for Social Change at the University of Johannesburg. Thank you all very much for joining us. Bongani, this is set to be a tight race. Why do you think Dla-mini Zuma should win?
Well, I mean, besides your package, which clearly states that here we have a highly experienced individual with a wealth of knowledge in government, we also have someone who has been nominated by two very key constituencies of the African National Congress. That is the ANC Women's League and the ANC Youth League. These are very critical components of our struggle, in fact, of the mass democratic movement. And as such, she stands a very good chance of being nominated this weekend.
Delegates who were barred from this conference because courts deemed that they'd been illegally elected, they were pro-Dla-mini Zuma. Are you concerned that that's going to upset the vote?
Well, there is a suggestion that they were pro-Dla-mini Zuma, but that is not quite, you can never be certain. I've seen quite several of these conferences. You can go to a conference thinking you've got in your bag certain delegates, only to find that, in fact, you don't. Part of the tactics of conferencing in the ANC is really to hold your final word into your heart. And things change. We saw things changing in 2007, in fact, in a conference in Polokwane where the then president really thought he was going to win, President Mbeki, who, in fact, in his ticket, he was running against Jacob Zuma with N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma. So the two of them were in a ticket against Jacob Zuma and Kgalema Motlanthe, who also became president of South Africa for a brief moment. So you can never be too sure. What we know for sure is that the numbers are very, very close. The race is tight. And the key provinces are backing N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma, together with, indeed, the leagues that I've mentioned. So it's very, very important to understand that you can never properly run or manage the ANC as a leader if you do not have these key constituencies on board. Right. Women in South Africa, for instance, make up about 62% of our voting pool in general elections. Okay. And the ANC Women's League is very much a very important factor here.
Okay. So, Lawson, the race does still seem to be wide open. Let's examine the other front runner now, Cyril Ramaphosa. He is proposing a new deal. What does that mean?
Well, firstly, let me agree that the race is incredibly tight, and I think it would be foolhardy to try and make a prediction, even at this stage, just minutes after the conference has finally gotten underway in Johannesburg this afternoon. I think, the difference between the two, essentially, I think, and I agree with Bongani in that N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma has had a stellar career in public service in South Africa. She's been a very experienced cabinet minister. But where I think Ramaphosa may have the edge over her is in his ability to turn ideas into strategies and policies. With his background, as you mentioned, as a unionist, as a key part of the ANC constitutional negotiations process, recently as deputy president, but also very importantly as chairperson of the National Planning Commission that developed the National Development Plan for South Africa, which is formally part of ANC policy. And I think the new deal that Ramaphosa put on the table a couple of weeks ago is really premised on trying to inject some life into that National Development Plan, to give it some energy, give it some focus. And one of the criticisms of the development plan has been the lack of focus on implementation and the lack of prioritization of its many, many recommendations. So I think we're beginning to see that with someone like Ramaphosa. And I think, as you say, that's why the markets have warmed to him, because there's kind of a political and policy certainty that flows from that would flow from a Ramaphosa victory this weekend.
OK, let's just take a look outside of the ANC now and go over to Trevor. Does either candidate here spark the interest of the people, the support of the people?
Unfortunately, it won't be a good election because the majority of people are excluded. This is an internal ANC power struggle. And the people who vote for either of the candidates, they've got their own personal political interests, which are mostly organizational and financial. So there's a sense from the broader masses that what goes on inside the ANC half the time has got nothing to do with them. Okay. Because, as you know, Yeah.
I just want to then if they say they haven't got a say in it, obviously this is an ANC vote here. But if they're looking at the candidates and what they're proposing, we've just heard Ramaphosa's New Deal. On the other side, we've got Dlamini Zuma's radical economic transformation plan. Do either of those policies excite people?
No, they don't, because with Ramaphosa, you know, he's a mining magnate, a billionaire, and he's closely associated with the Marikana massacre, where 34 striking workers were shot dead. His company, Shanduga, had a 9% stake in Lonmin, and he was a non-executive director of Lonmin during the massacre. And there is evidence that he actually gave an order which indirectly led to the shooting. With N-kosa-zana Zuma, the radical economic transformation policy of the ANC has been discredited by what is called here state capture, where it has been shown that the president himself and his close associates are, you know, in the pocket of a family called Gupta, which is actually getting government contracts, sometimes illegally. And in fact, the Gupta family owns a television station here and also employed Bell Pottinger, a British-based PR company, public relations, where they promoted the idea of radical economic transformation.
I really fail to understand what this has to do with the ANC conference, honestly.
Well, Bongani, it has everything to do with the ANC conference, because many people look at Dlamini Zuma as somebody who's going to keep South Africa on the same path as her ex-husband.
Look, let's first say this and make it very clear. The radical economic transformation is not N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma's making or dream. It's an ANC policy which dates back 2007. In fact, that is just the lexicon that dates back 2007. When you look at the ANC itself, you see that in most of its policies, in particular, the underpinning grand policy framework, the Freedom Charter adopted in 1955, clearly talks about a radical economic transformation wherein the majority of South Africans who happen to be Africans or black are excluded in the economy. And that's a big issue. Here we have 90% of the population not taking part, not partaking in the real economy. Radical economic transformation, therefore, talks to that. As for the New Deal, I'm not able to actually comment on it because it does not come from the ANC at all. I don't know where it emanates from. I wouldn't know as a member of the ANC who drafted it or what actually influences or really gets it to be alive in the way that
let's let Lawson respond to that then, Bongani, because, Lawson, isn't that the point? The New Deal brings fresh thinking to South Africa, and South Africa desperately needs a new path when it comes to its economy.
Absolutely, and I think we'd all agree that the fundamental challenge that faces South Africa is inequality, and we need to devise a set of policies that's going to be able to tackle that issue of inequality in South Africa. And a quick fix such as radical economic transformation, which to me is really a little more than a slogan and can mean lots of different things to different people. So what we need are carefully crafted policies that bring together the broadest range of South Africans in order to tackle the challenges that we face. And Trevor is also right. The issue of state capture and the poor levels of governance in South Africa have really hampered the ability of the African National Government to deliver to its people. So we've got to tackle issues of corruption, of state capture, of the undermining of the rule of law in South Africa in order to strengthen the foundations of our democracy so that we can live out the vision and the dream that is there in our constitution. And that's a challenge that I think whoever wins this presidential battle at the ANC conference is going to be confronted with. And that's a big challenge for either of them going forward. And the ability of the African National Congress to then translate that message into something that appeals to the broader masses of our people outside the membership of the ANC is the huge challenge that looms on the horizon as we approach the 2019 general elections.
Trevor, one of the huge issues in South Africa, as we keep referring to, is corruption, is the state of the economy. Just give us an idea, if you can, how corruption affects South Africans in their daily lives and how aware they are of it at the political level as well.
Well, corruption is the story of South Africa today. Every radio talk show, every TV debate will talk about state capture, how the government of the ANC, the president, is in the pocket of the Guptas. And the worst part is that at the same time, there are crises and tragic occurrences like the death of more than 100 mental patients in a place called Esidimeni, because the government, in its austerity program, it moved mental patients out of hospitals into NGOs which were not qualified to take care of them. And it has been shown that they were moved into NGOs which were owned by cronies of the ANC, people who knew nothing about mental health care, but who were trying to make money. So what I'm trying to say is that it is not only at the top with Eskom, our state-owned electricity company, but also at the bottom, there's corruption. Some of those delegates, maybe half of them, they also have got deals on the ground in the local schools, in the local hospitals.
That's rubbish.
So in a way, people have lost confidence
really unfair.
in the ANC.
That's really unfair to pass such aspersions. It's really unfair to pass such aspersions on people you do not know. It's really, really grossly unfair and, in fact, defamatory. You cannot say that about those delegates, that they've got deals. How do you know that? How many people out of the 5,000 do you know? How many people, black people for that matter, get contracts in government? You mean to tell me that 2,500 of those delegates have some contract or the other with government? I mean, that's total rubbish. This is the hyperbole that we deal with in South Africa, which is now just totally disconnected from the true facts, the real facts, not some creation of someone's imagination. Honestly, we have to be honest and deal with matters in a manner that can generate some kind of constructive debate.
Okay, Bongani, we get your point, we get your point.
And myself,
there's disagreement there over the delegates level. I just want to jump in there because you talk about facts. Let's talk about facts. South Africa, 30% unemployment, 55% below the poverty line. It's a fact that it's got worse in the decade that Zuma has been in power. How can you assure people that you're not going to see more of this with Jacob Zuma's ex-wife in power, this so-called Zooptification of South Africa? How can you assure people that there's not going to be more?
You know, Laura, it's disheartening for you as a woman to in fact,
I understand your point about bringing women to power. I get that. I'm in full support of women in power. But I'm not talking about that.
Let me make my point.
South Africa's economy.
Let me make my point.
That's the issue that's affecting South Africa at large today.
Allow me to make my point because you don't know what I was going to say. Allow me to make my point. Don't jump. Allow me to make my point, please, Laura. It's disheartening to hear a woman disparaging on another woman because that woman was once married to someone else. N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma is an independent, well-seasoned leader of the ANC. Yes, she was once married to Jacob Zuma. Yes, they are divorced. Yes, they've got children. But her ANC membership and her leadership ability has nothing to do with Jacob Zuma. She does not borrow her mind and thinking from Jacob Zuma.
Okay.
Only patriarchy and chauvinism will talk like that. And we have to really disuse of ourselves this whole notion that women can never be strong leaders who are independent, able to lead their countries. Now, Hillary Clinton dealt with this very same thing, brutally so, it's now being transposed into this wonderful, great leader of ours.
OK, well, it's not a stretch to link them, though, is it? Because President Zuma has thrown his support behind his ex-wife. Let me move on to Lawson. Interesting to see. OK, let's just move on and let one of the other panellists get
Dla-mini
involved.
Zuma's mind is
Lawson, if we're looking at the exit of Jacob Zuma, let's move on to that, please, Bongani. The exit of Jacob Zuma is key, isn't it, to his legacy?
Please.
How is he going to leave the ANC and leave the presidency? When are we going to see him go?
Well, I think he's leaving the ANC in a worse state that he founded it in 2007. It's a far more divided organization, probably the most divided it has been in its history. You know, the fact that the conference today was delayed by over 6.5 hours before we could get going, you know, is testimony to the divisions and the tensions that exist within the African National Congress today, which is a sad indictment of an organization
conferences of the ANC
that's over 100 years
delayed.
old.
Even the National
Bongani,
Policy Conference was delayed.
Bongani, please, can we just let some of the other contestants get involved in the discussion?
And the point is that President Zuma is leaving the ANC in an awful state. It's facing a crisis, as I said earlier, a crisis that it's going to confront in the next 18 months as it moves towards the 2019 elections. So whoever takes over from Jacob Zuma, whether it's N-kosa-zana Dla-mini Zuma or Cyril Ramaphosa, is going to be faced with a huge challenge. And the issue about N-kosa-zana, and as I acknowledge her contribution as a public servant earlier, she has taken on the mantle of the populism and the populist slogans of radical economic transformation and white monopoly capital that is associated with the Jacob Zuma faction. And Bongani cannot get away from that fact. So her Mbeki years of the 2000s are long in her past. And if she wants to claim that, she could have done so. But rather she spouted the populist narratives that have dragged South Africa down to the levels of inequality and increasing levels of poverty that we are seeing because, as Trevor points out, of the corruption that has become endemic within the ANC, not just at national level, but at provincial and local government level. And I don't think any of us can deny that. And that's part of the major challenges that we face, is to have an ANC government that governs in accordance with the Constitution and respects the Constitution and the laws of South Africa. This current Jacob Zuma administration has failed to do that.
Trevor, let's look ahead to the 2019 elections. Do you think we will see the ANC winning that vote?
It will be very difficult for the ANC to make the 51% mark in 2019. And that's part of the crisis of the ANC, because they want to hold on to power. And the power they're holding on is not for the masses, it's not for the people, but it's for personal and political and organizational interests. At the moment in South Africa, we have a very high rate of protests, communities coming out in the street and doing doi-doi, the war chant, dance in the street, crying for water, electricity, for jobs. The UN, the United Nations Human Rights Commission, and the South African Human Rights Commission have complained about the response of the ANC government to protest. They send police, they use live ammunition, they use rubber bullets. In fact, they are cracking down and undermining the rights of South Africans who are complaining against the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. This happened in Marikana when they shot down 34 miners on strike. It's happening now against the students who are demanding free, decolonized higher education. Each time the response has been to use heavy-handed methods on the people. Okay,
there we will have to leave our discussion today. Clearly, a very divided ANC party. We'll see if this conference can unify the ANC. Many thanks to all our guests today, Bongani Mbendwane, Lawson Naidu and Trevor Ngame. And thank you too very much for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, do go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Laura Kyle, and the whole team here. Bye for now.